So, good morning, Anastasia. We have been talking about this for a while of doing a podcast, and this has been your idea. So, give me just a few minutes of where we and why we decided that this was going to be a direction to go.
Perfect. Well, hello, Tana. Good morning. Yes, absolutely. I'm super excited. Glory be to God, actually. Um, I believe that Tana here, you've been told about a podcast for a while now. And I believe that our conversations just brought a lot of confirmation. The Lord has placed it on our hearts, and now this is just us moving in obedience. We know that our conversations led to great discoveries, and now this is an opportunity for everyone on this platform to see exactly those conversations that we're having and to be a part, and hopefully it'll bless some people.
So, yes, and I know one of the things that you and I have really launched this particular direction has been those who have been injured this way and
Mm,
wounded when it comes to sexual assault and abuse and just pain and grief. And I think that's what really started this conversation. And you and I, and we have another gentleman who is giving us his space, which is a blessing there. This Saturday on this month being Sexual Awareness Assault, oh, Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I've got to get that out. SAM for short.
mhm.
And this all started actually back in January or December of this past year when you said, "Oh, you've got to do this," and I'm sitting there going, "No, I don't." And again, God just kind of brought that to place, and we just wanted to give a little bit of a capsulation of what that's going to look like on Saturday. And I mean, God's just blessed us with. I know you're partially sponsored, but you're also there as a vendor with Twisted Coffee, so we'll have some coffee and tea and hopefully hot chocolate.
Yes,
I'm sitting here.
absolutely.
Yes, I'm sitting here sipping my hot chocolate as we're talking. She's much better at making it than I am. I'm just gonna let you guys know that now. I mean, I can make it look pretty, but she's better at the flavoring because I'm saying, going, this does not taste as good as yours.
You know what? There's the balance. We have a balance there.
So, but what brought you to the point of? I mean, I know I've shared my story, and we're going to hear some of that, so I don't want to break that out in this
Yeah.
um, podcast. But what brought you to the idea that I needed to be more bold? I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Great question. Um, when I heard your story for the first time, and it's the position in which you told the story. Most, you know, many of us, we come from any type of place that we could possibly come from, right? But you chose a place of power, a place of empowerment and endearment and self-compassion. And when talking about something so vulnerable, you never know how it's going to come out. You never know how you're going to share it, but you shared it with grace. So what I would love to see is you use the pain as a platform to help others through whatever it is that they're experiencing, what they experienced in the past. We don't know what this life is going to bring to us, but we know that if we can, have conversations, get connected, um, your story, it just, it brings so much just richness to shine a light on what people may have experienced, that don't know how to talk about it, that don't know how to walk it out, what it looks like afterwards. And through every stage of conversation, you just been building and building. And that's one thing we did talk about is every time I talk to you, you build on the conversation. So I want to see that.
Okay, okay. So we're talking about building on the conversation. I mean, if you listen to us within probably the first few minutes we've already heard that both of us have a very strong faith in God. That is
Yes.
going to be our source and our strength. And I know we both attend Social Dallas here in the DFW area of Texas, because I don't know how this reach is going to go yet. Neither one of us, we are on a prayer right now.
Amen.
And being obedient. And one of the things that I know we have all talked about was the fact of being unshakable this year has been our church's word. That has been our focus. And you'll hear me say this throughout, because I will bring in scripture where I can and where God directs and as He leads. And I mean, I don't know if you're there. We finally just finished memorizing it on our side. My little guy has got it memorized. And it's really that Hebrews, it comes from Hebrews 12, 28, and 29, is, do you see what we've got? An unshakable kingdom. And do you see how grateful we must be? Not only grateful, but brimming with worship, deeply reverent before God. For God is not an indifferent bystander. He is actively cleaning house, torching all that needs to burn, and He won't quit until all is cleansed, because God Himself is fire.
Yes.
And as we talk about those things, yes, it's taken some time to get there, but we got there. And that is from the Message version. If some of y'all are sitting, I've never heard that conversation or that text or that idea before. But being unshakable, when we go through heartache, when we go through pain, when we go through injustice, not that, I think we've had this mindset that God allows these things. And we have free will, and that's something you and I have talked about, we've wrestled with, and we've struggled with. And we have this picture of that free will, good or bad, right or wrong, evil or not evil. And what we'll hear, and when you say my story, we have talked a little bit about that this month would have been 20, it actually is, not would have, it is 22 years from when I experienced some really painful things in life, and really came into the position of having a crime committed and stuff stolen and taken from my own personal being. And I'm wording this very carefully, because I don't want to give away what we're going to be talking about on Saturday. Because part of that is the educating and the support and the empowerment of how do we move forward? How do we forgive? That was something you and I have talked about too, is part of the empowerment in understanding people who have been through trauma. I've been through trauma. We've talked about going through trauma in different aspects of our life. It's not just encapsulated to this month or this call to action. We all have traumas in our lives, and going through them. And how do we get through that? And one of the things you and I have talked about, Anastasia, is the fact of how do we forgive ourselves and how do we forgive God? Because often we blame God for our trauma, when really He was there. He was there watching, protecting, crying, and looking back, I can see the things that were precious, but He also wept. I mean, we see in where Jesus wept, He does feel what we feel, but because we have free will, there are certain times He's not going to step in, because it takes that free will away.
That is so good. You remind me of when we also brought up the whole obedience, right? And it goes back to you even sharing your story from a place of power, of course, but also just the fact that when you go through so many things in life, when you go through the trauma, when you go through the betrayal, I can only imagine, right? And you've allowed me a safe space to discuss what I've even experienced, to come into, grips with what happened. This is something that you have to face. And now that, this conversation that's going to happen, this soon. um, I just love the fact that this is a safe space for people to come in and be able to come to terms with what happened. How do I process it? What are the resources out there for me? And know that you're not alone. You're not alone in this. There is a healing journey. Let's start. Let's start today. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I'm glad you're saying a journey because
Yeah.
it is very much a journey. I said, I mean, I know it's been 22 years. And for
Mm,
most people, they'll hold on to that bitterness and that hate and the low self esteem. And there are times I still have those moments. I'm not going to say I'm perfect because
mm,
I am working towards that. It's part of maturity, it's part of growing. We've even talked about that too, where
mm,
we don't ever reach full maturity,
mm,
excuse me, until we until we see the face of God. And we're constantly growing in those ways and in that direction. Because when we stop maturing, when we stop
mm,
working towards maturity, we're done. We don't want to grow anymore. We have come to the point of now looking. I'm going to go back to the verse in Hebrews, where we now see we see our kingdom being shakeable, even though we are in an unshakable kingdom. And that journey is a process. I mean, it talks through scripture of we're running a marathon, not a sprint. And a sprint is quick, it's fast. I've got kids that run track. And that marathon is, you have to pace yourself at a marathon. A sprint is you're there and you're done. And that is not the journey of healing. That's not the journey of life. When we're there and done, what more do we have to look forward to? What more do we have grace in? What more can we extend compassion and mercy in? Those are the things we have to really be observant. As you know, I have friends who call me, you being one of them. And y'all, I have to laugh because I look back and I go, God, how did I get to this position? I am, for many people who are not aware of this, I'm actually more of an introvert than an extrovert, which surprises a lot of people. I like to be home. I like to be quiet. I mean, I do the jobs, and I say jobs because in this day and age, you sometimes have to have multiple jobs, especially as a working person, as you well know.
You know
And
what? I'm sorry.
yeah, go
Tana
for it.
wears several hats. Okay. Resume, very long. But it's funny because Tana's being very humble, but you are, we call you Superwoman for a reason. Definitely. You just do so much. You're very involved in the community. You serve at church. You serve everywhere you are. You serve in friendship. You serve in motherhood. You serve in so many places in so many ways. But I just wanted to put that out there. But you can continue.
And I laugh that you say that because I actually had a conversation last night with a friend that I was beating myself up, believe it or not. See, as I say, we still grow, we still mature, we still heal because that's what we're doing, right?
Yes.
And I had a conversation with a friend, and my friend was like, stop the defeatist attitude. That's why I talk about surround yourself with people who will speak truth into your life. Because
Mm.
I made a comment about doing something, and I said, I feel like I need, and this is what I said to my friend. I feel like I'm not contribute. I need to be a part and contribute to society.
I'm sorry, what? if if you're not contributing, then what are we doing? Okay, I know you have standards, okay, but wow, you should be the last person to be. You know what? I'm gonna leave that there. But no, no,
No, no,
you're
go ahead. You can give it to me.
you are doing more than enough. Okay, and one thing, when the Lord places on your heart to do more, I'm sure you do more out of obedience, but just realizing that, okay, you are where you are for a reason. God made you for such a time as this. You have your hands in so many things, and God, He said, whatever you do it unto the Lord. And I know that you do that unto the Lord, and that's why you prosper. That's why you prosper, Tana. To even think about the fact that you say, "I'm not doing enough in society." Acknowledge what you've already done. You've changed lives with the simplest conversations. You I remember when we were at church and the pastor said, "Hey, take somebody out to lunch today." You didn't have to do that. A lot of people did it, but you were very intentional. And I know that that's your word of the year is intentionality. And you so far, me, outside looking in, you've done that. You've done that.
Thank you. I mean, that I really appreciate that. So I said, give it back to me because that's why my friend said, stop the defeatist attitude. And that goes to show, even in progress and healing in the journey, there's still moments where I have to have those people to tell me you're being dumb in a
Hmm.
very loving way. And that's why I say, I mean, yourself and a couple of others are like, you're a superwoman. And in my brain and from the broken places of my life, I'm still having to pick up those pieces. And you've
Yeah.
heard me say this that there, and I want to say it's in Japan, and someone will probably
Hmm.
come and correct me because you know how we are on social media. But there's a process when something is broken.
Hmm.
A chipped plate or a teacup or a teapot, they go in and they fill it with gold. The
Wow.
cracks are showing,
Mm.
but there's beauty because gold has that beauty to it. So there is beauty in the brokenness. There's beauty in the pain. There's beauty in understanding where God leads us. And I think that was some of the things too that throughout these years, 22 years of going through two marriages, two divorces. I mean, there's just things that I still pray for and I still hold on to. At the same time, I would not, I had one of my mentors ask me this, if you had not gone through some of the things more recently,
Hmm.
would you have had the same faith and the same obedience if things had stayed the same?
Oh, Jesus. Mm. Mm, mm, mm.
And that's a hard pill to swallow,
Yeah.
but there's some honesty there because that goes back to one of my favorite verses is in James 1, where it says, "Count it all joy for the testing of your faith. There's trials and temptations, and for the testing of your faith will produce endurance and endurance maturity." And
Mm.
we go through those tests, we go through those trials because God is working on maturing us. And again, I'm going back to educating. When we educate on things like essays and
Mm.
being supportive, again, I mean, go back to 22 years ago, we didn't have the same education we do, but we're still growing in education. We're still growing in the thing, and I can say from because I have done this for as long as I have, of being on different arenas to being able to talk about the education. 1 in 3 women are assaulted, and 1 in 6 men are assaulted. And if we think about those numbers,
Mm.
like a church as big as ours, that is a couple of thousand on a Sunday morning, break that number down. How many people are in that room who are struggling with this area? Or in churches in general, places in general, you can walk through a stadium at the football games. You can walk through, I mean, I hate to admit it because I'm not a Cowboys fan, so forgive me, y'all. Uh, I'm a Chiefs fan. So, but we go through like even Cowboy AT&T Stadium. How many people in that one space have been affected, either themselves or they know someone who's been affected by this crime, this harsh reality? And instead of hiding and being silent,
Mm.
God has given you and I a place to even draw
Yeah.
from and say, and Antoine, who is our not here with us, but he's our co-facilitator for Saturday, and it's at his gym, and I'm trying to find my notes of where that's at so we can throw that location in, because I to pull this up, and I'm actually put my reading glasses on, y'all. I am that old. Yes, I mean, we laugh about that too. I am in my 40s, and I think honestly, being in my 40s has probably been the best time of my life.
Yes, absolutely.
So that location, let me throw that out, is 2629 North Stemmons Freeway, Suite 235, Dallas, Texas. And from there, we even got a blessing today that I'll be going to, because we said it is a fitness center. So we originally had said, bring a blanket, bring some pillows, and I still want people to do that. So we have that intimate, almost like a fireside. The coffee makes me think of like a fireside chat, really. The cozy little comforting space. But today I talked to a friend of mine, and she said, hey, I've got some folding chairs you can borrow for that day. So we'll actually have some chairs available. After we jump off here, I'm headed to Dallas to pick those up.
Yes.
But again, God's blessing in this process and in growing. And we really, one of the things we talked about is sharing my story. The other thing we've talked about is the supporting each other. Because I would not have gotten through the years that I had to get through to be on this side without support. I was telling you yesterday, I think it was yesterday, that I've got friends at this time of the year who know I maybe have a little bit more of a struggle, and will say, hey, are you okay? I'm checking in on you. Do you need to text me? Those are things that they know. They also remind me, like, common sense things. Did you drink water today? Did you eat today? Because when we go through things, and sometimes those memories, and we think of anniversaries, we celebrate them, but those anniversaries can also be painful, of memories that are past, that are hard. So that being said, we have those moments, and hey, do you need a shoulder to cry on? Is it okay to grieve? Because we still go through a grieving process. Grief is not just a one-time thing. Just like healing is not a one-time thing. It's a process.
Yeah, there's one thing I was thinking about too. When you're healing, sometimes the thing we do opposite, and it's a normal reaction when you experience something traumatic, right? Sometimes we like to go into isolation. And within the theme of this conversation is you showing, hey, my community is what helped me. My community supported me. And I just thought about, how we call you Superwoman, but your cape is actually a quilt of all the things that you've been through, but it shows that how people showed up, how God showed up. Every piece of that quilt is built on community, is built on just the things that you've experienced, right? So some of us, we are superwomen. Some of us are going through things, but we're so, you know, we've been through so much that we can't even see. You know what? I'm actually victorious. I got through that. And that goes with the place of power, the restoration of power, knowing that, you know what? You are still worthy. You are still enough. You are still on fire. You're still going to do some things. You're still going to shake some things up in an unshakable kingdom. You're still going to do some things. And I just absolutely love what you said there about the community piece. It's important. It's so important. And you won't even know that other people are dealing with it. When you said 1 out of 3 women and 1 out of 6 men, though some people don't even report it. So imagine.
So yeah, and well, just the reporting right there. I didn't report mine.
Wow.
We'll hear more about that too on Saturday, of why I didn't report mine, because there were reasons behind that. I know you know the reasons behind some of that. And when we look at what's not reported, it's really more of like 1 in 2 women of not reporting. And then more like 1 in 4 men. Those numbers just shrank.
Yeah.
But they shrank, but they got bigger at the same time if we think about
Mhm.
it. Because there's so much shame, so much guilt, so much fear. And it's how the enemy uses things to
Exactly.
hold us back from healing. And it took about, my oldest is about to graduate high school. My oldest son is about to graduate high school. And there's a reason I say that too, but you'll find out more about that later. And when thinking about that, he's almost 19. I didn't say anything until he was born.
Oh
Think
my
about
goodness.
22 years, and then right before he was born, this began to unfold.
Mm.
And I'm also going to say a little bit about this, but I won't go into detail. But there was a mentor that I had the night that things happened. God woke him up praying. You never know who's in your corner, and you never know who God's going to wake up to pray for your safety, your protection, your health, your strength.
Jesus. Oof.
And I know we hear a lot about praying mamas and praying grandmoms. I mean, I've got a few of those in my life too. You never know, and you never know who God's going to wake up. And it may be someone who doesn't even know or believe that God is actually in existence, to wake them up and say something needs prayer. You need to talk to me.
Mm.
We can't judge what God is doing because we don't see the heart of people. And that's where also that support comes in, that empowerment comes in. And how do we do that on a regular basis? How do we come in and say, okay, God, here I am? You and I have talked about my own practices of leaning into God in the morning. And I had a mentor who taught me that, to go and really plan out how we do things and how my life looks. And there have been times I'm like, are you really sure about this? Because this sounds like the craziest thing I have ever done. And at the same time, when we're in obedience, back to that,
Mm-hmm.
God shows up. And it's never met in areas that are not places of reward.
Wow. Mm. That is so good. Um, it's just the fact that, you know, I learned something from you. I learned a lot of things from you, by the way. Wealth of knowledge here. But one thing about it was, again, it goes back to intentionality. When you wake up in the morning and you shared some things that, you know, you had conversations with God, it put me in a place to want more with my relationship with God. Um, and again, when you're going through things, when you go through traumatic experiences, sometimes you put yourself on the back burner, you put God on the back burner, but you showed me how to put him back at the forefront. So how you start off your day, how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? But how do you start off your day? Do you start by talking to God and having those conversations, having those discovery meetings, um, and just allowing him to say, hey, this is what we're going to do today? And that showed me that when I take him off the sidelines, I also take myself off the sidelines. Because now I'm living in purpose, for purpose, on purpose. And that's one thing that definitely you have been amazing at.
You're gonna make me cry over here. I'm like, okay, wow. Especially having that conversation last night with my friend of going to get out of the defeatist attitude, the defeatist mindset. Even I'm gonna say, even with that conversation last night, the enemy knew that we were gonna have this
conversation this morning, and
Yes.
it was going to go live here if we can get it figured out. Um, Y'all, we had fun trying to figure this whole thing out earlier. But we're learning. We're growing. I'm in the location of Generation Z where we didn't even have computers at home. We had to go somewhere, or we had dial up. So I was sitting there going, how do I do this? And I'm like YouTubing it on one hand, I'm texting you on the other. Like, I don't know how we connect. But I'm
You
gonna
just make
say, just what you said, that purpose and that plan. And actually, I had a mentor teach me that. And that was
mm,
one of the process of. That's why I say it's so important to have people in our lives
mhm,
that, and I say you have a circle of friends. I mean, we have, and I'm going to take Christ as the example,
mm,
because what he did is he had his three close friends that went with him to do pretty much everything. Because he would
yeah.
kick everybody out of the room sometimes too when he was working on a miracle or praying, and then he had his 12, and then he had the others. And then he had the 72, and then he had more. Because we see this through scripture. He didn't
Mhm,
share the most intimate details with the 72. He shared it with those who were very close, those three. And there's wisdom in that. I mean, it talks about in Proverbs there is wisdom in a multitude of counselors.
yes.
There's also bad wisdom in the multitude of counselors.
Amen. Amen. Yes. We talked about that.
That, and the reason I say bad wisdom, people often look at things from a carnal standpoint. There's
Mm,
wisdom there. Don't get me wrong, because of life experience, of what they've walked through, that experience is wisdom. Because most of us, especially in my age, will say we don't want our children to make the same decisions and wrong, I wouldn't say wrong choices, poor choices, because that decision can be different. My decision can look different from someone else's decision,
yeah.
and it be right for them and wrong for me. So I say a poor choice, not a wrong decision. And that being
Mm,
said, looking at different things, like my comment of I want to contribute more to society, right? That was my comment. And saying that really came down to the fact of realizing, having a degree plan, having
mhm,
different things. I mean, what was the contribution? I don't have a
mm,
degree. I mean, I have college hours. I have certifications. I do not have a degree. And I'm continuing to work on certifications. As you know, I'm
yeah.
always learning, I'm always researching.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And
That
that's a good thing.
uh, and that's where I was looking at it going, a multitude of wise counselors. He had his three, and even his three sometimes gave him really bad advice. Like, I
Wow.
mean, I think it was Peter, like, let's go cut off the ear of the servant who's trying to arrest you. I mean, come on, a little bit zealous there, but we'll go. I hear those things, but then he also shared the very most intimate details of his life with these three friends.
Mm,
And then when it came to the Garden of Gethsemane, he took the 12, not the
yeah.
72, to pray with him.
Mm. Okay. Continue. Continue. Mm-hmm.
So as we build those relationships, and he even said, could you just pray with me for 1 hour in this? Knowing the friends who were going to support and encourage,
Mm,
even the three friends who were like, okay, we're going to try. But there was different things that happened throughout that story, throughout how it builds.
mm,
And that's where I really began to understand not everybody needs to know every intimate detail about our lives. There are those three that, and I had made a comment of like, maybe I should do this. This is why my whole thought of I need to add more to my resume. And that's where that conversation came in. And they were like, wait, what have you? I started writing down what I had accomplished. Because I was like, I don't feel like I've accomplished
yes.
enough. Let me
Mm.
say that I don't feel like I have accomplished enough.
Wow. Okay.
And I started having to write down what I had accomplished. And I
Mm.
started, and as you said, my resume is ridiculously long. And I was just like every time I talk to you, you're like, "You've done that? You can do this?"
It never fails. Like, you never cease to amaze me. I'll talk about something. I'm like, yeah, and you're like, oh yeah, I did that. Uh-huh. Yeah, I go, well,
Or
okay.
if I haven't done it, I've done a lot of research on it.
Yes. And it's, you know, let's the resume and then there's accolades, right? Um, but I love that. And one thing I did want to piggyback on when you brought up the disciples of Jesus choosing who and what season, and that's why it's so essential to have discernment.
Mhm. Oh,
When people
absolutely.
Yes, when people are with you in a certain season doesn't mean they come with you in the next. There are
Mhm.
people there for lessons and there are people there for blessings. Um, and the fact that you brought up wise is the man basically with multiple counselors, the multitude of counselors, right? When you are speaking to counselors, you still need to exercise your discernment. So
Mhm.
I wanted to put that piece in there, of course.
Well, and that actually brings us kind of back to this support and educate thing too, where
Mhm.
we're talking about Sam of 2024
Yeah.
is the fact of, and you and I've talked about this, and it's one of part of my passion is to help
Mhm.
the church as a whole, the little
Yeah.
C church, not the big C church, understand that mental health is huge in this day and age.
Mhm.
It's something, I mean, after 2020, the shutdown, COVID, all of these other things that have happened throughout
Mhm.
our seasons and these past few years, that we've had to shift our mindset to mental health. And it's
Mhm.
not always, and don't get me wrong, I do believe that God can heal and deliver and restore. I'm very much in that vein. I
Mhm.
also know he partners with people to help deliver, heal, and restore. And I am choosing my words wisely on the word partner rather than use, because you know my take on that, especially those who've been hurt and abused. Well, I've been used before. So when God
Wow.
uses us, is he going to abuse us? And that is why I carefully choose my words, partner. And I was working with a coach yesterday, with a speaking coach. I mean, God, again, brings people into my life, drops to help me, encourage me, and run this race. And we were talking about something very specific. We've all heard the verse in Romans 8 where it talks about God uses the circumstances for his, but here's the catch to this, the wording. God
Mhm.
uses the situation, he never uses people.
Okay. Okay. That's so good.
And that just kind of that brought to my forefront of, we say God's going to use us. For someone who has been abused and broken, used is a, I don't want to get near God because he's going, I've been used. I don't want to be abused by someone who we already believe and think, if we think in as the master of the universe. I don't want to be used that way. The creator of the, yeah, no, no, thank you. And as I went through this process and started realizing it's not being used, he offers us back to free will. He offers us the opportunity to partner together
Mm.
and grow. Just as if we would go to a doctor for, say, a heart attack. I'm not going to tell someone, "Oh, you don't need to see a doctor," when you're massively having a heart attack right in front of me. I may say, go get an ambulance. We're calling 911. You need someone who knows more than I do. And then God
Yeah.
partners with those physicians to bring health into our world. Same thing with, and I mean, I believe God can do something miraculous too,
Mhm.
but that's part of using wisdom as well. Back to
Mhm.
them. I am not a physician. Okay, sure, I could do CPR, but I can't open up your heart and restore and put the veins and the ventricles and the aorta back into the position and see what needs to be revived again. You don't want me
Mm,
doing that.
no.
You want someone who is trained doing that.
Mm,
Same thing with support and with educate. When we go through brokenness, when we go through woundedness, when we go through shame and guilt and pain, we need people who are trained, licensed counselors to come alongside us to say, okay, I know you're having a rough day, but let's do a reframing. Let's reframe this and do that reframe work to help us understand why this happened. Maybe we may not understand why it happened. We may
mm,
never get the answers we want. However, we're getting the healing we help. And same thing
mm.
with what you're saying, counselors. It's okay to fire your counselor.
Yes, absolutely.
If they are not providing what you need them to provide, and I will say this probably until I am blue in the face, until the day I die, until the day God takes me home, however that looks, when you are dealing with trauma, you need a trauma counselor.
Mm,
What I'm going to say is going to blow people away. You don't need the church dealing with trauma
mm.
counseling. You need someone who is professional. The church is there for support, for
Yeah.
encouragement, for uplifting, for empowering. To deal with the trauma, you need someone who understands the brain, understands the challenges in the brain, understands why they're doing. Now, there are good Christian counselors out there, but what I also want to say is you want to make sure they are trained in trauma, not just a generalization of counseling, because that challenges people to actually work through the trauma. A general counselor, cognitive therapy, there's all behavioral therapy, those are all great options. But when they say I specialize in PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, I've specialized in trauma, there's things of medical trauma, there's things of emotional trauma, there's things of spiritual abuse trauma. You need someone who is going to understand that trauma to be able to help you grow, because another phrase we say in our church, if you keep showing up, you keep growing up. And that is part of growing up. And I've even heard our own pastors say, hey, we go to counseling and you probably don't want us if we're not in counseling. I mean, I've heard a couple of pastors say that. It's like, hey, if we weren't taking care of ourselves, and that's where we have shifted
Mm,
so well in post
yeah.
2020 that we're beginning to see things, but we still need to talk about it. We still need to embrace that
Mm,
mental health is not a detriment for the rest of your life. Mental health is part of healing. We are body,
mm.
soul, and spirit, and our soul is our mental health.
Wow. There I actually remind me of last night when I went to Bible studies called The Table um here in Dallas, and when I was there, a lot of people, they're so used to me being on the prayer team. I had to step down recently, and they were like, "Hey, can you pray for me? Can you pray for me?" And the same theme I kept getting was, "Can you pray for my mental health? Can you pray for my financial?" And the fact of the matter is, even Pastor Rob Madu at Social Dallas, he brought several counselors, therapists, even on the platform to speak to us, to let us know, hey, yes, we are a church, we are a body that loves the Lord. We come together to worship in truth, right? But we also need to know there's some individual time that we may need to go to therapy, and it's okay. It's okay even if you feel as though, you're perfectly fine. It's always good to go see someone. And it's healthy. It's healthy.
Yes, absolutely. It is healthy, and that goes back to discernment
Yes.
of finding the right counselor.
Mhm.
Because when, for me, I had to find a counselor outside of Christian therapy because I
Mm.
was tired of hearing, let's just pray about it and move on. My mental health was not okay. I was
No.
like, I need help here. I need to
Yeah.
understand why these things happen. I need to understand what was my mindset? Where was I at? Why was I making decisions that may not be healthy? And again, you'll hear more about those topics on Saturday. Yes, yeah, we're also going to have a Q&A. So if you're listening to this, just show up for the Q&A.
Yes.
You
I
got
love
the agenda. You didn't see it on there?
the call out is real. Speaking of call out, what is the call to action?
So the call to action, which part of the call to action? Let's talk about that. What
Okay.
part of a call to action?
So I know that you said we have a Q&A at the end, right?
Mhm.
But the call to action, basically, when when everyone leaves, that day, how how can people that are in support, how can they support better, and then people that actually went through experiences of trauma, how can they have a call to action to help as well?
Okay. One, the educate and empower. I mean, and support.
Yeah.
So people who have let's start with the people who have experienced this type of trauma.
Yeah.
They're called to, there's a couple of things that they can call to action to. The first thing I would say is get a good support system.
Yeah.
And if your support system is not healthy, get out of your support system.
Hmm.
It's okay. You've heard me say this too. When the Israelites walked out of Egypt, and I heard this in a message and it stayed with me. When the Israelites walked out of Egypt and away from slavery, they had a new hello because it was a new life, but they also had to say goodbye.
That is so good every time. That is so good.
So this is a lot of prayer, a lot of intercession, a lot of God. What the heck am I saying right now? um, and so their call to action is find a support. Find people
Mhm.
who can surround them. Find those three friends. Really, I
Mhm.
mean, you can have a bigger collection of support. I have a good support system, but
Yeah.
my three friends are not who people think they would be. I mean, I've got a friend I have known for 20, almost close to 25 years. That support person has walked with me in places. You'll find out about this particular support person on Saturday as well.
Okay.
And they check in. I mean, we check on each other, but we also have the right, and this is one of the things about a good support system. We have the right to say you are being an idiot.
Mhm.
And I know that sounds really harsh, but sometimes we do idiotic things and we just need someone to tell us you're being dumb. I mean, you are not dumb. You as yourself, but your actions are being just ridiculous. Let's
Mhm.
reframe it. And then the next step is to have a good therapist. We were
Yes.
just talking about having, and I have fired a few therapists. I mean, I have probably fired about 10 or 12 therapists before I found the right one. And it is okay. Just because you think you have to keep going, it's okay to fire them.
Yeah.
The third thing is medical care. So you have your
Mm.
emotional care, you have medical care. Because when we go through trauma, our whole body is impacted. It's not just our
Mm.
emotional, it's not just our mental, it's not just our spiritual. Our physical health is impacted too. And the reason I say that, and we've talked about this, I had a heart attack and multiple TIAs, which some will call those mini strokes. Some of them people, that's a whole different thing for a medical field. There's different
Mhm.
trains of thoughts on that. But because I was holding in so much pain and so much, even healing several years after, there were still things that I needed to keep healing in. I still needed to grieve in some areas. I still needed to have hope in some areas. And I mean, I still laugh that you guys call me Superwoman because, like I said, my cape, that community. So this is building that cape, really,
Mhm.
is that quilt, as you said. So you have this kind of this. look at this as a tapestry, as each thing is
Wow.
woven back and forth. And that's what you do. So, for someone who's gone through trauma,
Mm.
support, therapist, um, a medical professional who is trauma aware. I know that sounds strange, but having a trauma aware medical professional will help understand where you're going and why you struggle with things.
Mm.
Because just walking in and not being trauma aware, and we are getting better at that too in the medical
Mhm.
field. I've got friends in the medical field who that's how I know this term, that they're now offering trainings and different things to help medical professionals understand trauma awareness. Those would be the things to do. And then the fourth thing of creating this tapestry for an individual going through trauma, the call to action, is be okay that you're not okay.
Mm.
Because we have
Mm.
been taught we have to look a certain way, we have to act a certain way, we have to, and I've got to, again, that close knit group, I can text and say I'm not okay. To the rest of the world, I may be fine, I may be looking great, but emotionally I am a mess. And what I want to do is hide out in my back room, or I want to throw the covers over my head. And having the people to say, "Hey, I'm not okay," helps us stay out of the depression, helps us stay out of the anxiety, helps us stay out of it. So that is that piece of that tapestry. Now, when we come to support, the other thing, got one more thing, because it is underreported. Trauma
Mhm.
is underreported. Do not allow yourself, and I say this because I've been there, to allow the guilt and the shame to creep in
Mm.
that I didn't do what I was supposed to do.
Mm.
I didn't report it. I didn't do this, because then the enemy will try to use that and go, "Oh, well, you know what? This really isn't that big of a deal because you didn't report it. It wasn't that important." That's how the
Mm.
enemy likes to play with our mind.
Yeah.
Allow yourself the grace, and if you did make the decision, allow yourself the grace to grieve. Either side, allow yourself the grace to grieve, because there is a piece that we don't talk about, and that's grief. And that's the pain. The shame and the guilt we talk about a lot. We don't talk about the grief. And
Mm.
and that's where the therapist comes in. That's where a good small support system, because you can talk about the grief. You can say, "Hey, I just need a shoulder to cry on." Whether it's a virtual shoulder, whether it's a phone call, whether it's, "Hey, can we go have a cup of coffee?" That is where that comes from. Then the Now we go to how to support, the call to action of how
Mm.
to support. When someone comes to you and says, "Hey, this is what's happened," first thing, don't shame them.
Mm.
Too often we hear, and this is what I've heard over and over, "Well, what were you wearing? What did you do?
Mm.
How did you say something? Did you encourage it?" It's all about power and control of the other person. The first thing a supportive person can say, and they may have to remind it 20, 30, 40, 50, 1,000, a million, a billion times, "It was not your fault."
Mhm.
And that simple statement, as simple as it sounds, is one of the most empowering statements in support. "It was
Mm.
not your fault." Because now it reprograms the mind. Because if that particular person, the survivor, I don't like using the word victim, because we survived. We weren't victimized, we survived. And we survived into thriving. The survivor did not ask for trauma to happen in any shape, form, or fashion. So when we hear, "Oh, well, you should have been acting this way, or you shouldn't have," no,
Mm.
let's just take that off the table, and let's realize that this was a crime. You wouldn't tell someone if their car was hijacked, or if they were out in they were in a parking lot and they were at a meeting and their car got broken into. Was it their fault they parked in that parking lot because everyone else parked in that parking lot?
Mhm.
So why do we victim blame?
Mm.
And that's where we need to start educating ourselves. Back to the education too, of the call to action. Being supportive. So that one phrase, it's not your fault. To the other phrase, sorry, my random phone call, telemarketers. uh, that one phrase of it's not your fault carries more weight than what people think.
Yeah. Mm.
And then from there,
Mm.
be that supportive ear. If they, in the beginning, they're going, that's why I say you have that small support system. Because if you are that support system, they may want to rehash this a few times just to, one, the disbelief, the frustration, the anger, the grief, the regret that all happens. Because they are trying to reconcile within themselves. And I say this all from experience. I'm not giving you anything that I haven't done myself. In that moment, it's going to be, I just need someone to hear that this happened. I need someone to know and see that I am not okay, but I'm trying to be okay. And it could be multiple times. It could be, I mean, and then as that healing goes, then the process grows, the growing
Yeah.
up grows, and the story itself changes from victim to victorious.
Mm.
From survivor to I'm barely holding on by a thread and I'm just getting through my day to thriving.
Mm.
And that is how a support person can be in place of how do we help you? And even that support person saying, hey, how is your counseling session going? Have you met with a therapist? Do you need, I mean, there are so many resources with between the Tarrant County Women's Center here in DFW to I know there's the East Texas Crisis Center in East Texas. There's so many centers that are built upon helping people grow through this. And sometimes it may even be that support person say, "Hey, I know this is your trauma, but is it okay if I drive you to that appointment?"
Mm.
Not even being in the room, but just saying, just so you know that I'm here supporting you. I'm here for you. Those are steps that the support person and call to action can do, and just be there because you don't know if it's 2 a.m. I mean, I've got a friend I text at 2 a.m. in the morning sometimes if I have, and yes, I'm 22 years out, but I still have moments where I have flashbacks and nightmares, and I'm like, okay, what happened? I know I can text this person in the morning. I know I can pick up the phone and call this person and go, I'm having a rough time. And because I have that support system and that closeness, then all I have to do is there's a code. All I have to do is text that code, and within a few minutes, I have my person
Mm.
available within just those few seconds. And it's a name, and there's a name, and this person has a nickname. If I text that particular nickname 2 to 3 times, I know I'm going to get a response because that's a code. And they know it's more than just a, hey, I woke up and I'm awake and no, there's something serious going on. So that's where
Mm.
we empower, that's where we educate, that's where we support. And when you get through to a place of beginning to heal, you see things differently. I mean, Anastasia, you and I've talked about this. My plan, let's go back to that moment here of want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Mhm.
My plan was to carry this with me to the grave and not tell a living soul. God's plan was I'm going to blow this into a dream, into support, into encouragement, into a position of Tana, you surrender, and I will put you in places you have never seen before. I will help you understand and direction back to that maturity level. If the things I hadn't gone through in my last divorce had happened, I would not be able to say what I'm telling you right now. As going, okay, this is no longer my dream. I'm now I'm now able to dream in a bigger place with God.
Mm. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for sharing the how to do the call to action, how to be a part, how to, empower, support, and educate, but also standing in the gap, changing the definition from victim to victor. It's huge. That this is I'm super excited for this conversation to again be built up when so just listening to the things, it made me realize as well that when you do go through trauma, the fact that you said it can show up in throughout your body, um it makes you want to confront it. You're like, you know what, you're not going to have the keys to this ignition anymore. I am going to
Oh, that's
take
good.
the wheel. I'm going to allow, yes, I'm going to allow the Lord to take the wheel, but I need to acknowledge what it is I'm going through. And the fact that, you even said maybe not going to a Christian counselor is the best always, because sometimes we mix things up, but it's important to get to the deep root of what happened. And I know with this fireside chat, there's going to be some opportunities to confront some things. So I'm excited, and I thank you for this in advance because I know some great things are going to happen.
Yeah, thank you too, because I mean, hey, I would not be doing this if you had not given me a little bit of a shove. I mean, because even in the
No.
beginning, I know we had a bigger plan. God shifted it, and I was like, I'm not doing this. And then you driving down the highway, and God's like, yeah, right. Do you?
But
It was one of
no.
those moments of, do you trust me or do you trust you?
Wow. Mm. Mm. Wow.
I love your facial expressions because I was like, I processed it. I processed internally, and I can see it on your face. It's so great to see that.
The face, it can be a good thing. Learning the poker face is not for me. You'll see. I'm like, really. Mm, yeah.
Right,
So,
right. That's why we said
well,
we wanted to video this too, because it brings in more of life. So we are meeting Saturday at I Am Lifted Fitness Center and Gym. We threw that address out because I don't have it pulled up again. And I know it's off of Simmons Freeway, close to 35. There is a Taco Cabana in front of it, so if you guys get a little bit lost, that's where it's at. There's parking along the street, and hopefully parking in the parking lot since it's a Saturday rather than a full business day. And I know there's parking behind the gym too. I did discover that the other day, though. There's a whole parking lot back there. Yeah, I know. Who knew? Who knew?
what?
And then, yeah, I know. If I had known that, we had an event there a few months ago. Um, but yeah, we're gonna open the doors at 1 p.m. We want to get started by 1:30. We're gonna do our welcome about 1:30. We have an agenda. Anastasia and our other facilitator should have gotten that email to them last night. I don't know. I did send it out. I said I was sending it out last night. I did. I promise.
It was top of email when I was looking for the link. So yes, you did send it out. I definitely need to take a look.
So the agenda is there. I said y'all will hear more about how I grew in this process of trauma and grief and through the grace of God, I am still standing, because you guys will find out why I should not be standing. It's really amazing that I'm still alive for many reasons. But we're also
Absolutely.
after we hear how God brought the situation to fruition and what He's doing, then the end of that conversation is going to be a call to action, as well as we're having that fireside chat with a Q&A. So bring your questions, come ready. We have chairs available, a blessing for that. We don't have a ton of chairs, but we do have chairs. So still bring a blanket, a lawn chair, a pillow, because we want to make this kind of that cozy, as if you were coming with a cup of hot chocolate or coffee and sit and just have a conversation, and to empower, support, and educate throughout this month. And I'm sure we'll do more, because we've been talking about that as well. So have a blessed day, and hopefully Anastasia and I will figure out the rest of this to get this posted. Hey, it's a work in progress, like we all are.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Tana, so much.
Oh, thank you. Oh, looking forward to the next one. Yeah, part
Well,
2.
we did it.
So, yeah, we did. Yay! I'll give you a call on the phone, because I've got to get on the road. So,
Okay, me too.
all right, I'll talk to you in a few minutes.
What's
Figure out how to
gonna
stop it.
happen?
How do we stop the recording?
Don't know.
Yeah, me neither. Okay, I'm putting my screen in recording. There we go.
Perfect. Thank you.